Welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast, where we will discuss how to defer taxes on the sale of your property, earning passive real estate income, and everything you need to know to go from active investor to passive investor. Join us as we interview passive investment sponsors, explore the journey of other retiring real estate investors, and share our due diligence process we perform to select passive investments. Investment advisory services provided by Insight Investment Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is only intended for clients and interested investors residing in the states in which we are registered to provide investment advisory services or exempt from registration. Please contact us to determine if the firm provides investment advisory services in the state where you reside. All content on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Material presented is believed to be reliable sources, and no representations are made by our firm as to another party's informational accuracy or completeness. Insight Investment Advisors, LLC and its representatives do not provide tax or legal advice, and nothing herein should be construed as such. Always consult with your tax advisor or attorney regarding your specific circumstances. Hello and welcome to the Retiring Real Estate Investor Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Bruckman from Insight Investment Advisors. Co-host Josh Wright has the day off. That's sad, but I am happy that we're joined by Bhavin Patel from Green Harvest Capital. Bhavin, how are you?
Good morning, Brandon. Thank you so much for having me. Living the dream here in Northeast Ohio.
And as well here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as we're the Midwest kids are connected on this one. So start off by giving some of our listeners a bit of background about how you came to the real estate space, how you came to Ohio, and why Ohio is so interesting. Give our listeners a sense of where you're coming from.
Yeah. So I was born in India. My family moved to Talmadge, Ohio when I was 9 years old, and kind of went through grade school, through high school there, and then went to Akron University for my undergrad and graduate degree at Ashland University. So majority of my life here has been in Northeast Ohio. Was fortunate enough to engage in real estate at about the age of 19, and kind of from there have started a career to focus on multifamily apartment assets. And so now we are about 1,000 units in our market. We own and operate them. We're vertically integrated. So we have our own construction management business, our own property management business, and our own private equity real estate firm where we form capital from accredited investors. We're extremely bullish on our marketplace. Ohio is, we call it the heartland for a reason. It's at the intersection of a lot of upcoming technologies, and logistically makes a lot of sense for the resurgence of manufacturing in our country. And also from a natural gas power production point of view, Ohio is strategically located here to basically take advantage of upstream, midstream, downstream infrastructure that's being built out.
That's very interesting. Let me start there and then we'll work our way back. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, Invest Like a Billionaire podcast. Shout out to the folks at Aspen who do that. The entire podcast was about the mega trend of manufacturing coming back to the U.S. And the most interesting stat that I heard there was wages now in China, if you factor in transportation and energy, are on par with the rest of the world and developed countries such as America and Mexico. I'm like, oh my God, like how many people don't know that? And is that not the easiest metric to measure? Well, if you're looking at that as a company coming back to America, just sort of makes sense now from a cost perspective. So how is your area in Northeast Ohio? How are you set up to sort of take advantage of that, a megatrend that's coming? It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how fast.
No, absolutely. Again, we tend to forget like a lot of the world as we know it has been built in the Midwest. And I mean that truthfully, right? You look at John D. Rockefeller, with Standard Oil, Cleveland, Ohio, right? You look at Carnegie with steel, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You look at Henry Ford with the automotive revolution and the production line of the way we manufacture. That's Michigan, right? It's like, this is the foundation for all that infrastructure. Well, the jobs left, those companies left, but the infrastructure remains. So logically, when we look at the EV revolution, we look at, how there's a geopolitical pivot occurring globally for American-made electric vehicles. Well, it just makes sense for General Motors, for Ford to heavily invest in Michigan, for companies to look at Ohio as the next place to do that, right? Because a lot of the backbone from logistics to manufacturing to warehousing exists here. One of the big bets that we're seeing on the ground is being made by Honda in our market. Honda is in Marysville, Ohio. Their global research and development has been here for quite a bit of time. They've done a joint venture recently to produce their first two electric vehicles with General Motors, which is doing the Ultium battery cell in Lordstown, Ohio, doing a lot of their backbone manufacturing here between Michigan and Ohio. And again, recently, public knowledge is Honda has announced a $4 billion battery plant manufacturing to occur in Avon, Ohio, which is here in Northeast Ohio. And then, we're hearing front end rumors at the state house level of a massive electric vehicle plant that is being built between Columbus and Cincinnati. Now, when you look at a multinational firm like Honda, they're making a serious bet. And I think it follows on the coattails of what Intel has done in our market and how, after a 46-state evaluation process, Intel ended up in New Albany, right north of Columbus. And so, again, logistics, transportation, upstream, midstream, downstream from a production standpoint, cheap labor, cheap energy, wonderful infrastructure from road, rail, and water, all make it fertile ground for manufacturing resurgence in this market, leading again to wage growth and job growth, leading to housing needs. And that's where Green Harvest Capital specializes and, was able to foresee some of this coming and have strategically made acquisitions, within 5 miles of Amazon distribution centers, right? Logistically picked near hospital systems. And also some of these plants that are going in are consequentially going to be within a small radius of our buildings.
Yeah, it's perfect. Make the link for us, because on the last project that we looked at from Green Harvest, we took a look at, obviously occupancy was extremely high in the area, but for these assets as well, we noticed none had been built in the last 5 years, and a reasonable expectation in there was that none were going to be built in the next 5 years. So now our head's exploding a little bit, right? We're saying, oh my gosh, there's such a supply of housing issue here. Put that on top of what's happening with this change in manufacturing. Talk to us a little bit about how much that supply is really constrained in those markets where you're going to need this housing.
Yeah. Again, housing goes back to median household incomes, right? Affordability is key, not from a subsidized perspective, but what should a market rent individual be spending month over month, year over year on housing? And by any matrix, it always comes down to about 30% of the median household income. So when we do the math for Ohio, we're at $60,000 in median household incomes. 30% of that is approximately $1,500 a month. So when you look at that matrix and you think about what new home construction cost is, when you think about, a 30-year mortgage is hitting 7%, well, it makes it difficult for the average Ohioan to afford a home, right? A new home, or to qualify at a 7% interest rate anywhere near $1,500, even if it's a modest home, right? And median household values are around $250,000, $300,000, depending on where you look. But again, we see the value appreciation for existing assets continuing to occur because of supply constraint. And we also see rent appreciation. The last acquisition that we worked on together, the median rent was $675. Now, again, just looking at a 5 mile radius of that asset, median household incomes in that market are somewhere around $52,000. So a little bit lower than the median average in the state, but again, still a $1,200, $1,300 average of rents. So we firmly believe that a value add strategy of spending between $15,000 and $20,000 in capital improvements to the asset will yield us somewhere around $8,000 a month in stabilized, sustainable rent.
And all of this plays into sort of the process that you're using to do your underwriting, but also to sort of scan for assets. So, number one is affordability, but you have some other factors there as well. What else are you looking as you sort of scan your way through potential acquisitions?
Yeah, a lot of the assets we will look at will be assets that are generational owned, 20, 30, 40, 50 years owned by the same family or a group that has owned it that has thousands of units. And then this is kind of the one asset that they didn't really pay attention to. Historically, all of our assets have had at least 90% occupancy or higher. So again, our market vacancy right now is 4%. So I think, again, the market demand outpaces supply. And that's when you see appreciation in values, appreciation in rents, right? It's a supply demand equation. And so, we will look at 1930 to 1970 construction buildings, primarily brick. We look at manufacturing hubs. We look at cities, that have that backbone. Amazon distribution centers, historically have played a big role in our thesis because we saw the job creation and the job growth. Speaking of Amazon, they recently announced frontline workers nationally will receive about $18 an hour, $18 or $19 an hour. And again, I think it's important for all of us to realize that Amazon is spending $1 billion to do that. And they realize it. And then they're doing it from a macro thesis of saying, look, two people making around $18, $19 an hour is almost $80,000 a year. Now, the national median income in the United States is somewhere around $67,000, right? It's like, these are transformative numbers that people are going to be paid. So therefore, they're going to look for more quality housing, more accessible housing, right, for their needs. And we hope to bring products to market that meet that need.
Side note there is if we actually tame inflation a little bit, part of the inflation story I don't think a lot of folks are talking about is there is potential for real wage growth here that, frankly, if you look at real wage growth in this country over the past decade, is long overdue. For your frontline workers who have seen, in essence, zero or negative now with inflation, real wage growth. So that's a really interesting part of the story that I think is probably overlooked, and it plays right into folks needing that housing in your assets and in this area, and the ability to pay more than $600 a month in rent. And is this stuff that, when I think about other sponsors and other investors looking at markets, these are the statistics they're overlooking, right? It's easy probably for someone to look at the top line statistics of, current median household income in Northeast Ohio or current population growth and go, I'd rather invest in Houston or I'd rather invest in Austin. These are the things that people are missing. Is that accurate?
I would say that's fundamentally accurate, right? And again, we don't operate in any other market. We're very Ohio focused, and we believe in the market that we operate in. We also firmly believe that we shouldn't do business where we don't comprehend micro and macroeconomic conditions. So again, for us, this is our lane. This is what we do. And this is where we do it.
As you mentioned some of the age of the assets, what's the hardest part when you look at that? What are some of the fears maybe there from maintenance and upkeep perspective? A lot of generational assets, older assets, I would imagine that there may be some maintenance and upkeep concerns. How do you look to address that?
Yeah, anytime we do an acquisition, we look at 5 things: roof, foundation, electrical, HVAC, and plumbing. And we give it a grade like the 3rd grade, right? It's A through F. If 3 out of 5 fail, we do not do the acquisition. We have our own construction services business, electricians, plumbers, HVAC specialists. And during our due diligence time, we physically walk every single unit. We are doing major mechanical evaluations with our vendor partners and our in-house employees, and we're gauging and grading these assets. We also build in CapEx reserves day one, when and if needed for these different properties. Now, an older investor once told me that he only buys buildings that are 100 years old. And then I said, okay, why? Right. And his thesis was, 100 years ago, buildings were built to withstand a fire for between 1 and 3 hours because the fire department wasn't available as readily and it would take a longer time. So everything was robust. Everything was built to last. And then again, take it with a grain of salt, but I think there's something to that, right? Where construction styles and construction quality was quite a bit different, 30, 40, 50, 80 years ago than it is today. And so, we genuinely don't find structural issues. Usually they're very, very, very strong, sturdy buildings. We'll look at the electrical, and if it's fuses, we'll upgrade it to breaker panels. We'll look at the plumbing. And again, depending on the age of the assets, most of the time it's already copper. And it's a non-issue. And if it's anything else, we look at it and we deal with it as the issues come up. Again, roof, so typically a 20-year life, so we'll gauge the age of the roof, and then either we'll have a repair and maintenance budget or we will have a replacement budget day one, right? And then HVAC heating systems are either boiler or they're, forced air. And we have an in-house individual that we work with to maintain and do all the proactive preventive maintenance. So I guess that's how we look at it. That's how we approach it.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a couple things there are very interesting, and it kind of spins me to sort of thinking about the way that you've structured your organization. So when we look at, for our listeners, they know we have the ability to look across multiple sponsors in the real estate space and what they're doing to bring deals to market for investors. Very few have taken the time to vertically integrate yourself the way that you have. Can you talk about that decision and some of the advantages of being completely vertically integrated across property management and the construction piece?
Yeah, it's painful. Don't get it wrong. I mean, again, it's
easy, right?
But we recognized during the pandemic that finding third-party contractors, finding qualified individuals was getting tougher and tougher and tougher. So we made a strategic decision to form our own construction services business at the time, because we felt like if we could offer somebody a salary and a great wage, that they would stay with us longer. And we would hedge a lot of the problems of delay in, work order getting completed, delay in CapEx getting completed by having those in-house individuals. The vertical integration really gives us the ability at its core to renovate approximately 10% of the asset at any given time. Now, what do we mean by that? Mm-hmm. At any given time in a cycle, we strive for at least 90% occupancy or higher. So as a tenant organically moves out due to lease renewals, finding another place, right, we will go in and we will renovate that asset. Well, if you have a third-party contractor, the property management arm has to communicate with the construction arm, supplies have to be coordinated, and the unit has to get turned, completed, and the leasing person has to go renovate it. By having all of those under one umbrella as a company, we're able to do that much more effectively. So on a average, turn will be anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Well, the leasing person, as soon as the turn is about 1 to 2 weeks in, is already listing the unit for rent. So when we look at it in the rearview mirror, what we're able to achieve is a approximate 90+% occupancy, a downtime of about 30 days on a unit, and again, a rent appreciation for anywhere from $100 to $300, depending on the market we're operating in.
That's beautiful. Does that equation change a little bit? As we talked a lot about constrained supply, high occupancies, rising wages. Does the equation change a little bit in terms of what you think about? Do you slow down that renovation schedule in this environment, or is it an opportunity to actually speed it up?
Again, market occupancy for us isn't going anywhere, right? I mean, as you see interest rates move up, the ability for a person to own a house becomes more scarce. Mm-hmm. There's not enough quality product in the market, right? So, we manage supply chains all the way directly buying from China or India or South America, depending on the product, or working with local partners on the ground with Famous Supply, which is one of our local suppliers that we work with, and they have their own brand and their product line, along with Lowe's, Home Depot, and the national, carriers. So we manage all of that in-house, right? We'll purchase our own flooring, a tractor trailer at a time. We're having conversations with people to purchase sinks and vanities and everything else at scale. So we see it as a strategic advantage in this environment to continuously renovate, to continually bring a quality product to market as people are looking for that product because it's more scarce.
Gotcha. Yeah, it creates options for you guys to think about how you want to approach it. But yeah, achieving those growing market rents and growing some more and bringing quality product to folks. We've had the ability to walk these units with you in Ohio, and these are solid places to live that anyone of any income would be very happy to live in these places, and that's a big deal. And I think it's probably a big deal to you guys as well, as to deliver, not only hitting bottom line numbers for yourself and for investors, but you're also delivering a quality product for folks to live in. That's important to you guys. I mean, we can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. That's at our core thesis where, we want our tenants to have a clean, safe environment. We want children to grow up in our apartment buildings, to go to quality schooling systems in the area. And we take a lot of pride in that, right? I think it's the right thing to do. And again, it's the right thing for our tenants, our investors, and the communities that we do business in.
Yeah, it's a full sort of stakeholder perspective that you're taking against this. How do you think about things have gotten really weird with interest rates in the market? And when you alluded to before, I think an advantage for your current holdings. How do you think about acquisitions in this environment?
Yeah, we're modeling several deals right now in real time. Some of the sellers have variable interest rates on their portfolio, and they're feeling the pain. And so we're underwriting them to see if there's an opportunistic buy there. Also, there is a little bit of a discount that we can achieve because of the interest rate movement. And again, we're talking to our debt partners to kind of understand, how that falls in. The value add proposition for our market still remains strong because, again, when you look at the average rent nationally, it's $2,000. The average rent in our market is $1,000. We're 50% of the national average. Well, our median wages are closer to $60,000 to $62,000 per median household incomes. National 67. So the tenancy in our market can afford at a 30% spend, closer to $1,500 than they do about $1,000. So, our goal across our portfolio, again, for next year is about $1,000 a month in rents, and slowly, steadily kind of increasing that over the remainder of the decade. So we still see opportunity. Again, we're looking and modeling assets that are still $600, $700, $800 in rents. So the value add strategy still is alive and well here. From a cap rate perspective, we're still seeing strong cap rates of around 6%, for existing revenue numbers. We have, however, switched to having more conversations with community banks than we do with bridge lenders or the permanent market lenders at the moment, because again, anytime the debt cost goes above 7% from a bridge lender perspective, it kind of puts a debt coverage ratio ceiling on the acquisition price, which the seller doesn't want to hear. So again, in the short term, I think that that's a reality. Over the long term, we still believe that cap rates are going to continuously compress for our market, again, as the product is scarce.
That's interesting. Yeah, the dynamics, we could probably have another hour conversation about dynamics and cap rates and rising interest rates, as these things do not appear to be operating together, to say the least. No. As it's not a one-for-one equation for a variety of external factors, specifically in your market. The continued constrained supply continue to put you in a position where acquisitions are going to be at the same level cap rates, if not maybe tighter, because we're watching, as you described, this train's going down the track. Like, rents are going up. And so we know that the market can take that. So, that's going to factor into the cap rate conversation as well, just as much as interest rates. And eventually, I'd imagine you hit a point where folks don't need to sell. If you have folks that are in locked fixed rate, or it seemed like a lot of the units that you were looking at, owners had those loans paid off. So with some of the motivation might be dissipate.
Well, so the counter argument to that we continuously come up against is, we talked about cost appreciation, inflation, right? There's also real-time wage appreciation. Service sector has seen about 12%, right? If you look at service sector, companies, plumbers, electricians, there's been massive appreciation there in what they can charge. So we look at construction costs have gone up about 18% year over year, post-pandemic. Well, there's a lot of, older owners that have not invested in their assets for a extended period of time because they've had extremely high occupancy and rent stagnation. So it was counterintuitive to add value to the asset because there was no appreciation, there was no inflation. Well, Now they're looking back at a 2-year hedge, and they're looking at their balance sheets and their P&L statements, and they've seen their expenses go up anywhere from 20 to 30%. They're finding it harder and harder to attract, property managers, plumbers, electricians, leasing officials. We face those challenges every single day. So we know they're facing them. So when they look at their bottom line, rent appreciation is zero, while their expense structures have gone up anywhere from 80 to 30%. And I think that that's going to drive motivation over the next 2 to 3 years for the older ownership to say, listen, either I have to put in 7 figures plus into the asset and do all the work and get the higher rents and get my value up, or I can exit. And that's where we're perfectly positioned in our market to be the go-to purchaser, right? Because we have built out those systems already, and we can act extremely quickly when such an opportunity presents itself.
And that's what we see with our investors. Here's where we dovetail together is, the want and desire and need to go and drive after what in essence is a changing landscape for them from a variety of fronts, be it good, bad, or indifferent. The game has changed for them. And some anticipated that, others haven't, and they're operating the same playbook they've been operating for a decade. And frankly, they just don't want to. It's just kind of that simple. They'd rather do something else with their lives. And so that's becoming a huge motivator, for our clients to sell. And probably you're seeing that as well, is that the needs and desires are just become different. And it's been a heck of a run. They've probably, one of the buildings that we looked at, we caught the owner in the parking lot, and described it as, her second home, right? Growing up, right? So the attachment to that, but it's their second home probably for a reason, is that it's been a tremendously successful ownership for, it seemed like, the entire family. But I could also tell, brief conversation, but I could tell they were pretty excited to sell to you guys and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, the family you're referring to, the grandfather built the asset. The father ran it, who's 89. And then the daughter that you met with ran it for 26 years.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And so if you think about that legacy, right, we like to think one of the fundamental reasons that we transacted with that family was they saw us as we see ourselves, which is stewards of these assets, right? Instead of owners or, fix and flip, we think of them in a generational mindset. We add value to them. This family, one of the key things was when we did due diligence, she was with us with every unit. And before she would knock on the door, she knew the name of the person on the opposite side. Wow. And this is a 173 unit asset. Mm-hmm. And so genuinely it was her second home. And it's like, we felt so much comfort that we were doing this with them because we knew that they were good stewards of this asset. And then, we hope that they can interact with this building and then drive their children by it and think of Green Harvest as good stewards, of assets and good stewards of capital.
And talk about that a little bit, because I think some of my observations was in watching yourself and Green Harvest was you've taken the time inside of this market to build and develop relationships and large and deep relationships with everyone in this space, from the apartment association to the work you're doing in Chamber of Commerce. Talk about how that's really important in your ability to be front and center for the acquisition of some of these assets.
Yeah, I mean, we sit on 3 different distinct entities and boards. Northern Ohio Apartment Association, the association has 250,000 units from Lake Erie down to Columbus. I also sit on the Ohio Apartment Association, where, again, all the associations from Ohio come together in Columbus and they pool resources and capital to advocate on behalf of landlords and landlord rights. Also, Akron is a wonderful microcosm where there's multiple multinational businesses, very strong hospital systems, and I sit on the chamber board there. And again, having the perspective of understanding where policy is and it's heading, along with, how do we react to that, is critical. And so what we're seeing, again, by having, a position with all 3 different entities, is that there is a shifting of mindsets, right? Workforce housing is at the forefront of every topic and discussion because we're seeing once in a generational wage growth. We're seeing once in a generation reshoring of manufacturing. We're seeing once in a generation investment in our healthcare systems. And the convergence of all of those factors is driving to the need for quality housing for the average Ohioan. And that's where Green Harvest Capital, hopes to meet those needs and exceed them over the next 5, 10, 25 years.
There's a huge opportunity here, and I know your guys are there taking advantage of it. We're excited to be part of it as well. But you are looking beyond this, right? There's more that you're looking to work on. Talk about the newest. Should we say venture? Is that what you call it?
Well, we call them verticals.
Talk about the newest vertical you're going to take a swing at.
Yeah, and again, it's Ohio focused, Ohio centric vertical, and we're looking at select service brands in the hotel space, and we're looking at our thesis there is very similar to multifamily. It's 1998 to 2018 construction, about 100 door keys in the hotel space. Select service brands are Marriott, Hilton, IHG, and Hyatt. And again, limited service brands that have been owned and operated by individuals for an extended period of time, and that we can go into, acquire, and do a value add process to. And so we hope to bring about 4 deals that we've been working on behind the scenes to market over the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, that's great. And you're working that's a joint venture, correct? So you're working with another partner there. There isn't no distraction here away from Green Harvest. The main thesis still running after that. There's also a joint venture here where you're working with a partner, correct? To kind of
absolutely
taking sort of more of the day-to-day or taking on the actual operation of the assets.
Yeah, our core competencies, again, besides being a boots on the ground operator, is the asset management skills, investor management skills, and the scalability component to any business, right? And so we have done a joint venture with a firm called Spark Hotels. Very like-minded individuals that own and operate the asset. They have about 250 employees, 5 assets in our market at present in the select service brand sector. They're approved by Marriott, Hilton as preferred operators and owners already. So they will take on majority of the day-to-day operation. Green Harvest Capital is bringing, our asset management skills to the table.
Awesome. No, it's great. It's great utilizing partners in sort of that space and to kind of grow and to utilize the things that you've already learned about this market. It seems like to us, it seemed like it is an easier putt than trying to go to another market, trying to recreate what you guys are doing here somewhere else. Gosh, how long would that take? Even if you went down to a Cincinnati or tried to run this in Detroit, that would be difficult, correct? I mean, not impossible. It's something you guys could accomplish, but it seems like this is an opportunity that's more in your backyard and easier to access. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Again, in the beginning, I think it's critical for any business owner in any space to understand macroeconomics, right? And then it's like we thoroughly understand our microeconomics. So the way we think about it is we're going to start here. We're going to continue to develop our foundation here. And once we feel stable, and then again, that could happen in 5 years, 10 years, or never, we will look at other markets. But for the foreseeable future, until we get our home taken care of, we're not looking anywhere else.
Got you. No, it makes all the sense in the world to utilize and continue to leverage those relationships in market, and your knowledge in market is through the roof. I've learned more about Northeast Ohio than I knew, and I had those same sort of basic, I think, assumptions or stereotypes, frankly, about the market until we dug in and learned. So this is awesome. So I hope our listeners really, really get a sense of what's going on here. There's really great stuff going on here with the market and with, of course, the Bhavin and Green Harvest. Bhavin, when you have a few free minutes, what is it that you're spending time on?
Yeah, at present, I have 2 daughters, a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. So a lot of swim classes, a lot of school events, right? We love hiking. So we have wonderful metro park systems here in Northeast Ohio. And so, the girls and I do that often. Beyond that, just hanging out with my family.
No, it's perfect. Sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Bhavin, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope our listeners really enjoyed this one. Where can folks learn more about Green Harvest? Obviously, you can always come to us at Insight if you want to learn more about the deals that Green Harvest is doing. But if you want to explore, where can we point people to?
Absolutely. I'm very easy to find on LinkedIn, either Green Harvest Capital or Spark GHC our hotel vertical are easy to find and follow. The way we think about our market, is kind of laid out in a lot of the articles we publish on our profile. So please feel free to, read them and share them and, direct message me, and happy to have conversations.
No, it's awesome. Bhavin, thank you so much for spending time with us.
No, thank you so much, Brandon. Take care, sir.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.